Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Star Wars with Universe Sandbox 2, and today we're going to be talking about a very important planet in the Star Wars universe. Specifically, we're going to be talking about Coruscant, or is it Coruscant, as my Google Translate tells me? Well, here's actually a really interesting fact about this particular word. Coruscant is an actual word in English, and it sort of means glittering or shiny, and that's because if you were to actually look at the planet, and here's an image of it, it does have a little bit of glitter going on it because there's a lot of things and structures and lights that create this effect. Now, in the actual universe, though, in Star Wars universe, and specifically in the canon of Star Wars, it's actually pronounced as Coruscant. Now, people obviously argue about it, but it's Coruscant. It's not Coruscant, as it is pronounced in some of the earlier Star Wars video games, specifically TIE Fighter, which is actually one of my most favorite games, but there's one character in there that keeps saying Coruscant, and it just makes me so angry. Anyway, so it's Coruscant, and we're talking about Coruscant Prime, the star, and obviously the system where the planet is located. Now, this is the galaxy we've used the last time. I haven't really changed much, except for, of course, I've added a lot of different objects in Coruscant Prime. Now, as you can see, this is actually right in the center of the galaxy, or I guess close to the center, and it is considered to be the galactic center in Star Wars universe. Specifically for the coordinates sakes, Coruscant Prime is actually known as 000. It's basically the zero location. This is where all of the other galactic locations are calculated from. So basically this is our center, and this is of course because this is basically the capital of both the Empire and the Republic, and all of the other previous republics and empires used this particular planet and particular system as their main center. And so here I'm gonna show you what this looks like. I'm gonna enable orbits for a second. Basically this is what we have. So there's actually several objects orbiting around the main star called Coruscant Prime. There is actually quite a lot of planets here, and many of them are inhabitable and inhabited. And let's talk about the closer planets first, because these are the ones that we probably don't really get to see or hear much about because they're just too hot. So there's one called Revis or Revis. I'm not really sure how to pronounce this one because it's never really mentioned. And it's a super hot planet. We can actually zoom into it. It's even hotter than Mercury. It's basically essentially molten because it's just really close to the main star. The second planet, also very hot, called Platoril or Platoril. And here it's basically, this one, in this game at least, it's completely dark. It's very black and very scary. Then we have two more really hot planets, and here the names are not as creative. One is called Vandor 1, and the second one is called Vandor 2. And so this is Vandor 2, and the third one is called Vandor 3, and this is actually the only planet, or one of the other planets, that is actually actively mentioned in Star Wars. And this is where a lot of the training takes place for many clones during the Clone Wars. So this is actually sort of like the training planet because it is relatively hot here. It's a very harsh environment, and so a lot of soldiers during the wars use this for training. So this is the first 5 planets, and the 6th planet is Coruscant. And here we're gonna zoom into it, and we'll notice that, okay, my moon is escaping. That's not good. It has 4 moons. It has 3 moons called Centax, Centax 1, Centax 2, and Centax 3. And it has a 4th moon called Hesperidium. Now, the interesting fact about Hesperidium is that this is sort of like the vacation center for all of the rich people from Coruscant. Many people have their sort of villas here. Many people have their beautiful holiday spots, and basically this is where people come for a rest. This is of course until somewhere down the storyline, at least in the extended universe in the books, something happens, but I'm not going to spoil this for you. But basically, yeah, this is the vacation spot. This is the super awesome, super expensive moon where people go for a rest. Now, Coruscant we're going to come back to in a second, but you'll notice that here, this is what makes it Coruscant. What makes it really shiny, what makes it really sort of glittering, is the fact that there's actually many different lights, and this is what it looks like in the movie. Here's the picture of it. Basically, there's lights on the surface because this is actually a super massive mega city. We're gonna come back to this in a second. Let's just talk about other planets first. Oh, by the way, the reason why there's actually lights on the surface is because for some unknown reason in the game, when you add a random terrestrial planet, a random rocky planet, some of them will have these lights on the surface. Now, I don't know if this is a bug, and if it is, it's an awesome bug because it actually creates this really cool effect. But the thing is, as soon as I start the game, as soon as I make it play, they'll actually disappear. So this is why my game is paused right now, because I wanted to keep this effect. I'm going to show you later on how it disappears as well. Anyway, so this is Coruscant, and then after Coruscant we have two gas giants. We have one called Muscov. I'm gonna go with Muscov. I like how this sounds, and it has 21 moons around it, so it's kind of similar to Jupiter in a sense. A little bit smaller than Jupiter, and if you zoom in, this is kind of what it looks like. We don't really know much about it, but some battles did take place around this planet. And then after Muscov, we have Stantat, and this one has 23 moons, so it's a little bit more than Muscov. And here, nothing really special happens in Star Wars movies or Star Wars books, but obviously some battles do take place here as well. Now, in between the gas giants and the next planet, there's really almost nothing. But there's another planet here that's really cold, and it's actually called Improco. Now, the actual planet, we don't know much about it, but the moon of Improco is known as the frozen moon of Improco. And on this particular planet, there's actually some really interesting things happen. Specifically, there's apparently some sort of a secret storage for the Galactic Republic, and I believe the Empire as well. And on this frozen moon and frozen planet, there's some secret vaults filled with, you know, treasures or some sort of a knowledge, or basically something that's really important for the Republic or the Empire. So this is a really important sort of a moon that's away from Coruscant. And the last planet here is called Nabatu, and Nabatu is not particularly important in the actual series, but we know that it does have rings. It has a lot of frozen rings and various rocky rings around it, and I didn't make that many because I didn't want to slow down my game too much, but we can obviously add more by going into add rings, and I have them preset here, and we can actually change this a little bit just so that it looks a little bit better. And we can add them right about here. There we go. So a little bit more rings, and looks slightly better, but not as good as it would be if I added a lot of rings. But anyway, we don't want to slow down the game, so let's not do that yet. And so basically, this is the Coruscant Prime system. Very interesting system. Very lots of different planets, lots of different people living here as well. And of course, this is the cultural center, the Empire and the Republic center, and the center of military as well. So this is why there's a military training center on Vendor 3. Now, going back to the actual planet, on Coruscant, we know that there is actually 1 trillion, or at least 1 trillion residents. In comparison, today on Earth, there is something like close to 8 billion people. We're talking about 1 trillion. That's basically 2 more zeros, multiplied by 100. So this is how many people there are on this particular planet. And the actual idea of this super planet and the planet is basically one big city is technically from Isaac Asimov, the really ancient science fiction writer who came up with many different concepts, and one of them was, of course, a planet that's essentially one mega city. And so George Lucas, when he was making Star Wars trilogy, the original trilogy, he decided to kind of implement that. And the original plan was to make Alderaan this particular planet, but due to the constraints of filming and technology, they actually weren't able to recreate this. And so they had to settle for the Death Star as being a kind of a city and a region where they would have all of their battles. And Alderaan was simply made a homeworld of Princess Leia Organa and was destroyed by the Death Star. And only in the Episode 1, Episode 2, and Episode 3 of Star Wars do we actually get to see Coruscant. So the first time we get to see this planet is during the Phantom Menace, where I believe we get to actually kind of get a glimpse of the planet. Then we get to see the speeder chase, where Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi are pursuing the wannabe assassins. And during that pursuit, we get to see most of the city. We get to see the different speeders. We get to see all kinds of districts, and of course the general feel of what the city feels like. And lastly, in episode 3, we actually get to see the planet from the outside, where the actual opening battle takes place above Coruscant, where the forces of Count Dooku try to basically destroy the Republic and try to take control of Coruscant. But I think it's best if we actually explore this particular planet from the surface, and to do this I'm going to actually use another game called Star Wars The Old Republic, where we do get to explore the planet in quite a lot of detail, and we also get to learn a little bit more about it by finding various historical artifacts. And you definitely should try this game later on if you get a chance. But so I'm gonna basically go through the planetary surface and show you what it looks like, and of course talk a little bit more about it. And the first thing I want to talk about is of course the speeders, and this is me getting into one of these things. And basically here, the first question I always ask myself when I saw the scene from the original, or not the original, but the more recent trilogy, is, you know, do they crash, and what happens if they do crash? And here actually there's a whole discussion about it, where people are convinced that the crashes are extremely rare, specifically because the most of the vehicles here have a very complex auto navigation system that moves these speeders along a really complex pre-programmed route. And a lot of the taxis here are able to travel at speeds of up to 190 kilometers per hour, or about 130 miles per hour, and drivers can receive special permission to leave the programmed skylanes and basically take shortcuts. And the other interesting thing about this city planet is of course the levels. So think of this city as basically layered in levels from 1 to, I think the highest one is 5,127. Now, the higher your status is and the more rich you are, the higher level you live on, or basically work on, or whatever. And most of the time, of course, we get to see only higher levels because we deal with, you know, emperors, senate, we deal with really important people. So we don't get to see the lower levels of the city unless, of course, you play video games. In video games like Star Wars The Old Republic, or older games like Knights of the Old Republic, you actually get to experience Coruscant underworld, you get to experience the lower levels, and this is where things are really interesting. Specifically, apparently level 1 on this planet is so dangerous and so scary that it's completely uninhabitable. At least that's its official recognition. It's uninhabitable, but obviously there are people and there are obviously creatures living there. And the lower 1,000 levels or so are known as the Coruscant underworld. This is basically where all of the crime happens, where all of the underworld crime lords live, and where most of the people are from generally lower class. But at the same time, at the lower levels, you're actually forced to have only artificial light. There's actually no sunlight that gets there. And you're also forced to breathe the air of toxic fumes from factories and all kinds of vehicular waste, and specifically from waste that comes from the top. But at the same time, this is where most of the fun things in Star Wars stories actually happen. So a lot of the things actually do happen in the lower levels of Coruscant, and most of the manipulation, intrigue, and all of the planning of the assassinations or galactic conquests obviously happen here in the lower levels. Now, the other thing that's actually present on this planet is of course the Jedi Temple, which is ironically built on top of the really ancient Sith Temple that was destroyed by the Jedis earlier on in history. And this is where young Padawans get to basically learn to become Jedi Knights, and where the High Jedi Council was. This is also the council we get to see in the Episode 2 and Episode 3 of Star Wars. But of course, this later becomes the Imperial Temple when all of the Jedis are killed in Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And of course, this temple is later captured by the newly born Darth Vader, who of course used to be Anakin Skywalker, and he captures the Jedi Temple while actually murdering everything and everyone inside the temple. And this is probably the saddest scene you'll get to even see in the entire Star Wars movie, where he enters the temple and decides to destroy everything. And this is of course the day when Jedi Temple became the Imperial Palace. And this planet has such a rich history that I think I would actually recommend reading more about it by yourself, because there's just so many things happen and so many of them are spoilers that I don't want to say anymore, because things just happen and they go wrong for this planet for many years, even after the Battle of Endor, which ends episode 6 of Star Wars. And I think this is such an amazing planet, and it's so different from everything else in Star Wars universe and actually any other science fiction book or series or movie that I actually really enjoy being here. This is a planet that's essentially one large city with like 1 trillion different sentient beings on it, and just the idea of having such a large city is absolutely incredible. As I mentioned before, this idea is based on a world called Trantor, and this was from a book called Foundation series by Isaac Asimov, who basically wrote these awesome science fiction books where he talks about something very similar. And in his books, he even describes this concept, and this is actually based on a Greek concept called Ecumenopolis, which basically stands for a very large planetary-sized city. And so this idea is really interesting. I'm really surprised more science fiction books don't explore it in more detail. But anyway, before we finish, I just wanted to stop by saying, so if you've watched the first 6 movies of Star Wars, you may actually wonder, so what happens to this planet after the Battle of Endor? What happens after the second Death Star is destroyed and the Emperor is killed and Darth Vader is also basically dead? And what happens to the Republic and what happens to the actual planet is that it does lose its status of being the center. And what the New Republic decides to do is, instead of focusing on just one world as being their center, specifically Coruscant, they choose to move the capital based on the member worlds that are part of the New Republic Senate. So the new capital would always be moved depending on who the members of the Senate are. And this way they obviously wanted to prevent any kind of possible new empire from being formed, and of course wanted to actually make it more fair for other Senatory members to basically have the same kind of power like everyone else. Anyway, so that's it for Coruscant, probably one of the more interesting planets in the entire Star Wars canon and Star Wars galaxy, and hopefully you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please subscribe, like this video, and share it with your friends. Show it to other Star Wars fans that you think may want to learn more about the Star Wars galaxy, and definitely check out some of the other videos I posted, and other Universe Sandbox and other space videos as well. Thank you so much, guys. I'll see you in the next video and game you later. Bye bye.